in our final week of the Games We Play series. In the past 3 weeks, if you haven't had the chance to be here, we aren't talking about board games or sports competitions like this. I don't want to mislead you. We are talking about the games that we play in our relationships. So it's probably going to be a little more uncomfy for everyone, myself included, because I'm super competitive. Probably too much so for someone with exactly zero athletic ability in their body. But even things like bingo, like, why can't you just call my number? I just need one more number. Like, it's not that hard. Why can't I just win, right? Or like Mario Kart, why can I not simply stay on the Rainbow Road? I do not understand why it is so hard to keep this little cart on this video game. But I am just way too competitive. And we all have probably played games with people who are like, oh, even when they lose, that game was so much fun. I'm so glad we played. Will never be me. Catch me quitting and going to sit on the couch to read a book, because I will absolutely only lose about 2 times before I am then out of fun. But the last 3 weeks, we have talked about the honor game, the blame game, the comparison game that we play in our relationships, and about how when we play these games in our relationships to win arguments or to get a leg up on someone, or, no one actually wins and everyone actually loses, right? So even gracious losers at games don't actually like to lose either. But there are so many more games that we play in our relationships that we haven't talked about yet, like the scorekeeping game, where you've probably heard yourself say, remember that time you blank, or remember that time I blank. The guessing game, where everyone else knows that there's a problem, but you're not sure and you're just kind of left guessing at what it might be. The one-upping game, where everything that everybody else has to say, or, if you have something to celebrate, they have something more exciting to celebrate than what you could possibly have. The reciprocity game, where we look at what we've done for someone and look at what they've done for us, and the scales don't actually seem very balanced. There's so many reasons why we play these games, but the bottom line that we've been looking at the last 3 weeks is this. Relationally speaking, a game that requires a loser is a game that no one wins. The win in any relationship, you guys, is the relationship. So when we play these games that require there to be a loser, the relationship suffers. Communication breaks down, trust gets broken, and there's not a winner. Everyone loses. And today we're going to talk about the change game. And this is the game where you've probably heard yourself at one point or another say something like, if they would just lose a little bit of weight, they'd be more attractive. Or if they could just learn to chew with their mouth closed, I wouldn't want to punch them in the face. Or if they could stop doing this thing and start doing this thing, they'd be better off. Or if they just relax and not be so anxious all the time, they'd be better to be around. Or if they would just listen to me and do this thing that I'm telling them, their life would be so much better. It's when we look at the life of someone else and we can see all of the areas that they need to change, and we judge and we compare or we critique or we bribe or we challenge or we try to control and change the other person. And before I dive in, I want you to think just for a minute about the most amazing experience or place that you might have ever visited, like something that took your breath away. Maybe it was a bucket list item, someplace you've always wanted to go, but someplace that just, once you experienced it, you just can't stop thinking about it. For me, I've been lucky to travel quite a bit in my life. If I could afford to be a professional traveler, that is exactly what I would do. But I'm here instead. But one time, I got to visit the Roman Colosseum with my own eyeballs, you guys. It was unbelievable. And if you've never seen it, this is a picture. You've probably seen it in movies or TV shows. But I was in high school. I had grown up in the Midwest. I hadn't gone too many exciting places at that point. And so to think of the historical significance and just this iconic amphitheater that, at that point I had only seen in movies, just blew my mind. And I wanted to show y'all a picture of myself at the Coliseum, but this was before, digital cameras and iPhones because I'm old. But this will have to do. But I was thinking about the Coliseum again recently, and did you know that you can leave the Coliseum a Google review on the internet? I shouldn't be surprised, honestly, but I thought, you're one of the 7 wonders of the world, but yet you are not exempt from the beatings of internet trolls. That just blows my mind. I can't, you should get an exemption on Google if you're one of the 7 wonders of the world, but I digress. So here are a couple of reviews, and yes, I know these are probably satire, and yes, I know people still spent time writing a 1-star review for the Coliseum. Anyways, that is also mind-blowing, but here's the first one. We were checking this town and stumbled upon this circular building. It was kind of large and hard to get around, so we tried to go through, but they charged an entrance fee. What a ripoff for what? This building is in total disrepair. Parts of it are crumbling down and some walls are even missing. Oh, and did I mention, it doesn't even have a roof. Looks like it was built a while back, maybe in the 90s. Rude. And I don't think they built it up to code. It doesn't have vending machines. Okay, here's the other one. Really run down, building in a bad state of repair, air conditioning really poor. Good to see they cleaned up the blood after the last show. Okay, here's the last one. The place was in ruins. Stadium seemed like it hadn't been used in years. So old, none of the seats even remained, had to stand. You guys, I know these are jokes, okay? So don't come at me later and be like, did you really think those were real? I didn't, but also somebody still took the time to do that, okay? So I'm just hoping they also knew it wasn't. But there's actually a scientific reason. Research shows that our brains as humans, we are more likely to leave a negative review about something than positive reviews. There's actually brain science behind it. We have a stronger emotional reaction to negative experiences than we do positive experiences. It's called memory bias, if you want to look it up later. But that's when something doesn't live up to our expectations, or we see something that isn't quite what we thought, and our brain actually has this strong emotional reaction to that negative experience, more so than the positive, which is so sad for me. And it sticks with us way longer than any positive experience we could have. But because these negative emotions linger longer, you're more likely to talk about it. You're more likely to share it with somebody you know, or post a review on Google about it, even if it's the Coliseum. And even if you're not the kind of person that would leave a review or say something, maybe negative out on social media for everyone to hear, we all have our own way of kind of internalizing these negative experiences. So maybe you have some sort of silent protest you do by just not going back to that place, or whatever it might be. We all have ways that we process these negative experiences we have. We have this natural bent as humans to kind of have this, critical eye, or maybe this bad habit of seeing the negative. And we are really good at it, you guys. A+ professors in critical analyzing of other people. But we're just naturally wired with this critical eye. Or maybe it's just you. Maybe I'm the only one in the room with a critical eye, and maybe the rest of you have these good eyes, which kudos to you, okay? Where you see people and situations through these rose-colored glasses, and everything's fine. It's fine. There's glitter and rainbows, and everything's wonderful, okay? That's not how I'm naturally wired. I wish that it were. So if that's you, feel free to let me know how that works. I'm not sure. But the negative, I think, for most of us, far outweighs the positive in our eyes. Things don't live up to our expectations or measure up to our standards. And ultimately, we're critical of something, and what we really want is for that thing to change, whether it's that person, place, that experience that we've had. But we've all been on both sides of the change game, right? Meaning we've been on the side where we want someone to change. We see something in them we want to change. And then we've been on the side where somebody sees something in us that they want to change, and that always feels just a little more uncomfy, right? I'm sure my husband could give you a laundry list of things that he wishes that I would change. Like, for example, I know he wishes that I would stop running into the shelving in the garage every time I pull my car in. I try, okay, but I just can't judge. I don't know where it is, and so it's fine. But I know that he also wishes that I would just pick up a golf club again and not just to move them from one place to get them out of the way. But you guys, when you win the golf league one time, there's nowhere else to go. So you might as well just retire on that note. So that is what I have done. But I have a list too, right? I have a list for him. I wish that at some point his body would learn to stop sneezing so loud that it wakes the neighbors. But I don't know that that is ever going to happen. And I also wish that he was not good at everything he tried the first time. Axe throwing? Was he a lumberjack in a previous life? I don't understand how somebody is good at axe throwing the very first time. Give me a break. But whether it's someone you're married to or someone you're raising or someone you work with, or maybe it's a roommate that you have or somebody you volunteer with, we have all heard and we've all thought, they should work on that, or they should stop doing that, or they should just start doing that. And I'm not talking about constructive criticism here or constructive feedback, because I think that's healthy in relationships, okay? And I'll get there in a minute. But the tension in this message today, and the tension around the change game and where this change game becomes so toxic, is when you and I foster a critical spirit in these relationships that hurt people. And it's far too easy for us to stand up on some moral high ground, looking down at other people where we're superior, and from up on that high moral high ground, the value of the other human in front of us, the one also made in the image of God, is secondary to the issue that we think must change. They're not measuring up to our standard. They don't believe like we do. They don't live like we do. They don't vote like we do. They don't parent like we do. And so they should change. We look down on them, and honestly, a lot of times we let them also know that, which is a little gross. But we drop passive-aggressive comments, and I'm guilty of this. When my mom had the last living, working flip phone in America, I could not get over it, okay? I would remind her that if she just had a smartphone, her grandkids would text her more, because they know right now it's so difficult because she has to push all these buttons 18 times to send a text back, right? Or we'd talk about the new phone upgrade that we had gotten, or we'd talk about how eventually they'll stop making that or servicing that phone, and then she'll be forced to change, right? Or eventually we just bought her a smartphone and added her to our plan. And why did I even care? Okay, if she wanted to rock that flip phone until it died, it was not hurting me for even a second. But I was obsessed with her getting this different phone. But the more we tried to keep pushing it and getting her to change, the more she dug her heels in. And I do not blame her, because I am the exact same way. Because no one likes it when someone is trying to change us. No one likes being criticized or judged or made to feel like a project or like they need to be fixed in some sort of way, right? When it's happening to me, I immediately throw up a wall and resist and create some space. You're not going to tell me what to do, right? I do what I want, kind of a thing. And that is not the best way, for the record. Okay, we're going to get into that. But why do we do it to someone else when we hate it so much when it happens to us? The change game doesn't work. People get hurt and relationships get fractured and everyone loses. And if I can just be honest for a second, like you'd expect anything else from me at this point, but you know who the worst at this game is? It's Christians. Okay, you probably thought I was going to say like Republicans or Democrats or something like that, but nope, it's us. And maybe not you here in the room because you guys are all perfect, but those Christians out there, they get it so wrong, okay? In fact, we take our faith and our Christian beliefs and we use that to build up this moral high ground where we look down on other people. And what that does is just breeds this self-righteousness. And it's why Christians can often get a bad rap and be seen as mean or harsh or judgmental. And the thing is, oftentimes we take up this, moral high ground in the name of Jesus. And the funny part is, Jesus never came to look down on anyone, you guys. So why are we up here trying to do that when that's not why he came? He came down to love people, all people, even the ones we think need to change, and even us who also need to change. But the actual change isn't always the issue. It's the spirit about how it is brought to the other person that is often the issue. And Jesus spoke directly to this, and the verses we're going to look at today are some of Jesus's most famous, whether you've been around church for a long time or whether this is your first time in one. Hi, please come back next week when our lead pastor's back. But you've still probably heard these words. You just may not have known that it was Jesus who was saying them. And in the other games that we have talked about, Jesus' answer for them was always, knock it off. Quit doing that. Stop playing them. Take the asterisk on the scorecard and get gone. You lost, okay? But in regard to the change game, I think he's actually not telling us to quit as much as he's telling us a different way that we can play the game. And here's why. In Jesus' most famous sermon, the Sermon on the Mount in the Gospel of Matthew, which Matthew was an eyewitness to Jesus' life, right? He walked with Jesus, lived with Jesus, listened to Jesus' teachings. And the Sermon on the Mount, he actually probably preached in every city and town that he went to, because it includes things like the golden rule and how to serve other people well and how his views on how to live a fulfilling life. It's all packed into this Sermon on the Mount. But in Matthew chapter 7, Jesus speaks to the change game directly because he also dealt with this. We are not the first people who have not gotten it right, right? Or who looked down on other people or who thought somehow we were superior. Well, it might feel very American. We didn't actually coin the concept. And so in Matthew 7, starting in verse 1, Jesus looks at all the people listening and he says this, do not judge. Now, this verse tends to get misunderstood a lot of times. And in fact, you probably haven't heard it even quoted by Jesus. Maybe you didn't even know that he said this, but instead you heard it this way. Only God can judge me. Saint Tupac of Shakur. And if you don't get this reference, please don't go look it up, because then you will definitely judge me and you will have missed the entire plot of the talk today. Okay, so, but Jesus goes on and he says, do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. What Jesus is and isn't saying is really important. He's not forbidding moral judgment or accountability in your life. He's not saying that we should never speak the truth in love to someone. He's not saying that we should never hold space for those conversations to help other people or have those difficult conversations that help us to change as well. The word judge is not about what's right or what's wrong. The word specifically, which is krino in Greek, can mean to decide or discern or condemn. And in this context, Jesus uses the word as a synonym for condemn. And he's warning against being judgmental and condemning others without first examining our own faults. Because you too will be judged. You too will be condemned. And when we criticize and jump to other people's failures and condemn other people without having an actual loving concern for them as human beings, you guys, that's no good. No good. When we aren't talking to someone we care about because we care about them, but rather because from our vantage point up on this high horse that we're sitting on, their issue has become primary and they as a human being have become secondary, we have a problem. If we are critical before we're compassionate, we have a problem. If we are legalistic more than we are loving, we have a problem. If we adhere to a law to such a degree that we lower the value of a human being, we have a problem. If we let what we believe get in the way of building a bridge in a relationship, we have a problem, okay? And that's the tension in the change game. Jesus is saying, hey, don't judge with a critical spirit, or guess what? God will judge you with the same critical spirit. He's saying the same way that you judge others, you will be judged. And with that same measure, it will be measured to you. So let me ask you this question. How do you want to be judged when, not if, the time comes for someone to call us out, to call you out, or when the time comes for someone to hold us accountable, or to challenge us, or to tell us how we could be doing something differently, or how we could be better followers of Jesus? When the time comes, and it will, for that moment to happen, how do you want that conversation to go? Do you want that feedback with a judgmental attitude to come from somebody who's up here riding on their high horse, talking down to you, shouting it for all the world to hear? Or do you want it to be brought to you in love by somebody who cares for you, who has concern for you, and is coming to you because they love you as a human being and not because you're this issue that they see? And Jesus doesn't stop there. He probably could, but I don't think he thought that we would actually get it because, we're kind of hard-headed, or maybe that's just me again, but that's fine. But he says, why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? In verse 3, he's asking, why are you looking at this speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and not looking at the plank in your own eye? Why are you so busy looking at what someone else has to fix, this speck of dust, while ignoring the areas in your own life that need fixed, this plank? Well, I'm glad you asked, Jesus, right? First of all, when it comes to them, it's not a speck. Have you seen their issues? They're huge. They need to quit this. They need to pay this person back. They need to apologize to them. They need to start doing this, and they need to stop doing that. They need to change. And I don't have a plank, for the record. Thanks for asking. I'm seeing things clearly. I see it for what it is. I'm just being honest. I'm just keeping it real, I just want what's best for them. I'm not perfect, and sure, I can improve, but a plank, I don't think so. Jesus is using rabbinical hyperbole, which is I feel like I should say it with my pinky out. But it's, in Jesus' day, rabbis would use these extreme examples to get their point across, or, have an illustration that we might be able to understand. And he's not saying that your problems are big like a plank and everyone else's are small like a speck of dust. No, he's saying this. Everyone else's problems should seem small in comparison with your concern for your own problems. Okay, I'm going to repeat this again. Everyone else's problems should seem small in comparison with your concern for your own problems. He's saying that you shouldn't put so much focus on everyone else's problems, which you can't control or change, and should put more focus on your own problems that you can control and change. You might have heard it this way: mind your own business. Okay, that's just another. If Jesus was talking today, I think that's what he would say. But he continues by saying in verse 4, how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? Why are you looking at your brother, your sister, your in-laws, your coworkers, your boss, your neighbor who lets their dog poop in your yard? Why are you fixated on them and magnifying all of their issues while minimizing your own issues? You've been trying to change them for so long, and this whole time we have our own stuff to deal with. Put that time and that energy and that attention where it can actually make a difference, which is on yourself. There's actually a word for people who constantly identify other people's problems but fail to address their own. Do you know what that word is? Jesus uses it in verse 5 and he says, "You hypocrite." Eek, right? If we can easily point to what needs changed in everyone else but never ourselves, we're being a hypocrite. Now, remember, Jesus was saying this and not Allison, so if you'd like to email him, it's jesus.christ at, I'm just kidding. But in all seriousness, if we spend more time fixated on fixing others and identifying things that they need to do and not the issues that we have that need changed and the grace that we need from our Heavenly Father, then we're being a hypocrite. And holding people to a moral standard that we don't ourselves adhere to is either ignorant or arrogant. We're either ignorant of our own shortcomings or we're arrogant to think that we have full understanding and knowledge of someone else's shortcomings. But either way, it's hypocritical. And Jesus didn't leave it at that, though. He said there is a healthy way to play this change game, and it's this. You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. If you want to play the change game, that's how. You have to examine yourself, look at your own issues, your own problems, your own shortcomings, and then think about what is it about them and their issue and their problem that bothers me so much. Like, why do I care, right? Maybe I see a little of myself in them, and that makes me feel bad, and that's why I care so much. But we have to start with ourselves. And then you can ask him, like, is there something you're trying to change in me? Remove from me? Grow in me? What is it that you're trying to teach me? Then you will see clearly. If you start to examine yourself and have some honest accountability about why those things bother you and also the areas where you fall short and maybe where there are gaps between where you are now and where you would like to be as a Jesus follower, because then we'll be able to see more fairly, more clearly, more justly, more compassionately, more graciously, more humbly. And then we'll be able to help people make those changes because we will be doing it in love with gracious feedback and loving accountability. Because there is a time and a place for those things that we often call constructive criticism, but you have to start with you. For example, I am never a worse version of myself than when I am driving. Okay, I'm defensive, and I'm not talking about a defensive driving course, although I have taken one of those too because I have a lead foot, but that's neither here nor there. But when I get in the car, you guys, I am ready to go. The light turned green, go. There's no turn on red posted. Turn your car, please. Like, what are we waiting on? We roll up to a four-way stop and you're not sure if it's you or who it is. Well, I'm just going to go while you sit there and figure it out, okay? It's often also when I'm super quick to criticize or judge, because if someone runs a red light, I'm like, what are you trying to do? Get us all killed here? Ugh. But then when I find myself accidentally running a red light, for one reason or another, I'm like, oh, it's too slick to stop safely, I say, like in the middle of summer. And then I also am like, give them the little, oops, so sorry, Midwestern wave, like, eek, as they're yelling at me, as they should. But I realized, you guys, I'm a hypocrite. Like, I had to do a little self-reflection and be like, no, girl, you cannot be yelling at them if you are doing the exact same thing. You have to start with you. Now, pastor and author Andy Stanley put it this way. He said, the more conscious I am of the work God has yet to do in me, the less critical I am about what he has yet to do in you. And I just think that is so profound. And, which is why I have this illustration today, because I think we need to use more mirror and less magnifying glass. This is not an original illustration, but I think it's going to be super helpful in explaining what we've been talking about today. We have two tools, right? This magnifying glass, which we use to examine everyone else, and we have this mirror that we can use for self-examination, except I'm not going to get it too close because these grays, they're really going to show up. But what he's teaching here is that the problem for a lot of our relationships is that we are spending too much time looking through this magnifying glass and not enough time using this mirror. And his solution, if you want to play the change game in a healthy way, is that we need to spend more time with the mirror. Look at your planks in your eye, because we all have them, these shortcomings, these problems, these areas that we need to invite God to fix, because no amount of us trying to fix them is actually going to do any good. But you guys, we love this magnifying glass, okay? It is powerful, right? Like, we are walking around like we are some Sherlock Holmes trying to find the problems in everybody's life. We love this. And I think there's a few reasons, actually, why we do this. And one I've already mentioned is because it helps us to have this elevated view of ourselves. Our religious beliefs so often make us believe that we're better than everyone else because we spent 1 hour, 1 day a week in a building that says church on the outside. But I think there's other reasons. I think one is that often there's this dark side of us, or maybe we have a secret within us that nobody knows about. And so if we can magnify somebody else's problems and bring those to light, then we will be able to keep those under wraps a little bit. So that way, we can deflect whatever is actually going on deep down inside of us if we're able to magnify everyone else's issues. Lastly, I think we're prone to using the magnifying glass because we actually misunderstand the very heart of God. Jesus did not come into this world to get anybody. There's no gotcha, like, oh, sorry, gotcha, kind of a thing. That is not why he came. He came down to love everyone exactly as they are, to show people that there's a better way to live, a kinder way, a more compassionate way, a more his kingdom bringing down here to earth kind of way. But the longer that we hold this magnifying glass, the more judgmental we become, the more legalistic we become, the less capacity for compassion that we have, and the more harm to the kingdom and our relationships that we actually bring. And let's be real. The longer that we hold this magnifying glass, the more we start to believe that we are actually the ones in charge of changing anybody in the first place. We aren't the God in someone else's story, you guys. We're just not. We're just a vessel that he uses. So, you guys, can we give God his job back, please? Okay. We're really terrible at it. So we're going to put that down for a minute, and we're going to pick up the mirror. Because the only way to stop playing this toxic change game is if we look in this a little bit longer, where we're able to reflect and see our faults and our shortcomings. And you know what that will do? Make us espresso depresso? No, I'm just kidding. Also, Joel was like, what? I've never heard that in my life. It just means make us depressed, okay? But it will actually begin to soften our hearts towards each other. It will lead you and me to have more grace and more compassion, not necessarily less truth, but more empathy towards one another. And the longer we hold up this mirror, you guys, it'll foster this attitude that says, I love you enough that tell you what's not right in a way that is caring and compassionate. And then tomorrow, I'm going to need you to turn this around on me and also help me as well. But the longer we hold up this mirror, the more our hearts should break for people before our minds judge them. You guys, and you only get here by looking in the mirror. So what does this look like practically in our lives? Other than walking around holding a mirror all the time, what does it look like to spend more time with the mirror. And I think the first is honest self-reflection. Whether that's spending some time with a journal or maybe the notes app open on your phone, that you can write down these reflections that you're wondering about. Maybe it's turning off the music in your car on the way to work and just asking him, like, where are you looking for me to grow? What can I change? Where are the gaps in my own life where I might be missing it? What changes do I need to make? Maybe you're going through a rough season and just ask him, like, what lessons are you trying to teach me in this season? We have to get a little uncomfy, okay? Take a good look at ourselves, which we do not like to do, and see where those gaps are. What things are keeping us from living a life that looks more like Jesus? Number 2, spend time in Scripture. Now, when I say Scriptures, you're like, have you seen how big this Bible is? I do not even know where to start. Well, I will tell you. There are 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Start there. Pick one, any one of these 4 biographies, and watch how Jesus talked to people, how he interacted with people, how he lived among people in a world that was just as broken as ours is now. The life of Jesus, you guys, is the best mirror. And the more time you spend in those Gospels or in Scripture, the more you'll grow your awareness of how much growth you need, how much growth I need, and how short we actually fall to the standard. But the beautiful thing about Jesus, like I talked about earlier, is that it was never meant to make us feel bad about ourselves. There's no gotcha, like, oh, yep, you finally figured it out. That's what you're doing wrong. In fact, spending time with your Bible will grow your attitude for the grace that you've already been given and increase your ability to extend that to everyone else around you. So in the moments when we do need to use the magnifying glass, we're more compassionate and more humble and more helpful, actually, because we're more aware of what God still needs to do in us, and we're less obsessed with what he needs to do in everyone else. And then lastly, invite accountability. That's how you hold up the mirror. And inviting means you can't get defensive when asked for feedback, and you actually have to listen, okay? This is so important because we sometimes get feedback and we're like in one ear, right out the other, right? But we've all got stuff that needs to change, and God's going to put people in your life to point those things out. And for me, it's my husband and my friends and my coworkers. I've got people in my life left and right that give me feedback. And a lot of times, like we mentioned earlier, my reaction to those is not so great. Sometimes it's a little resistant, but that is also in a lot of times comparison to how that message is being given to me, how it is being received. So this is why we've also talked about using that mirror, so that way we are those people when we're giving this feedback that is humble and caring and compassionate. But there are times where I get mad, where I get defensive because I'm human, but I've grown, and it's a process, and it'll be a process for all of you too. This is not an overnight thing. So on Tuesday, don't come to me and say, somebody gave me feedback on Monday, and I tried to listen, but they were riding it on their high horse. Yep, okay, it's going to happen, but it's a process, and we have to work through it, and we're going to try, right? That's all I'm asking. That's all I'm asking. We're going to try. Now, I also want to say this, because I do not want this talk to come across as tone deaf, because there might be some of you in the room or watching online who have been judged and hurt by Christians. And I know you have, because I have. And also I have social media, so I see it happening every single day in the comments. Tragic. Okay? But I also know, because I have been that Christian as well, who has probably judged and criticized and not gotten this right many a times, right? But that's how I know. And honestly, it's a miracle that many of you are in this room today based on conversations and relationships that you have had with other Christians. And I just want to say, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for myself in the way that I have handled things, and I'm sorry for other Christians that you've probably run into, and I'm just grateful that you're here. But I want us to be a church, you guys, that plays a different kind of game. one that shrinks, divides, and tears down walls and brings us closer to Him and to each other in our relationships. You guys, let's be the church that this world needs us to be. The Jesus followers that your family and your coworkers and your friends and the barista and your kids' teachers and your community need you to be. The church that spends more time self-reflecting and spending time in Scripture and inviting accountability so that we wouldn't have time to focus on the speck of dust in another person's eye because we're too busy loving the human being right in front of us that He created in His image. You guys, let us be the church that right now decides that we are going to change things and maybe, just maybe, even change how Christians are perceived out in the world. Because you guys, that change, it starts with us. It starts with every single one of us in this room. You guys, God is too good for us to get in His way. Honestly. So let's get that plank out of our own eyes so we can see more clearly as we leave today and help us to love people well when given the opportunity to show them what being a true follower of Jesus looks like.